So I got pinged on r/competitive Overwatch. And I just looked at the title of the Reddit post. I was like, oh, this is going to be juicy. This is going to be juicy. And it says, opinion, Overwatch coaching is generally overrated. All right, well, we will take a look at this. And I'm going to give my quick 2 cents, unbiased 2 cents before we we take a look at the post, so I'm not affected by the post here. So I've already made a video on this. I think it was, You're Never Gonna Hit GM, I think was the title of the video. You're never gonna hit GM. Why coaching doesn't work. Yeah, there you go. And basically, the idea is that, as I said earlier, successful players are not successful because of their coaches. Coaches are an assistance to overcome barriers and hurdles and to have an outsider perspective and to maybe help shape your perspective of the game into an accurate way to learn. But you still have to not only put in the work, but I would say the vast majority of learning is done on the player's end of things. If you guys look at any other sport, if I was like, let's say a track coach, I could work with my players. This is where you put your hand. This is where you put your foot. These are the cues you need to be doing. This is your technique. These are the drills you need to be doing. And I could work with you on 2 or 3 days a week, hour and a half, hour, training over and over and over again. And obviously the player's passion and effort would matter, but the track coach gets a lot of credit for the system and the drills and the coaching and the feedback that they give, right? Cheers, Flute. But an Overwatch coach doesn't work like that. An Overwatch coach is not in your ear coaching you during the game. And even if he was, if you've guys seen any of my live coaching videos, you notice that a lot of my live coaching is really, really brief and really short, to the point, very simple, because the game is way too complicated. Imagine if a sprint coach was yelling like 5 different cues as you're running. That would be the equivalent of like trying to live coach and micromanage every single thing in Overwatch. You couldn't do that. What it does is you set up drills. But that's so Overwatch is this live action game where the player has to learn and develop habits on their own with some feedback from the outside. It's too fast-paced. It's too fast-paced. It doesn't work. And the other thing as well is because Overwatch is so unbelievably complicated and there's so many micro interactions, the best way to learn those things is just to be exposed to them over and over and over again. So are Overwatch coaches useful? Yes, obviously I that's my job, so I would like to think that I'm useful. But most of my value as a coach is giving you new perspectives, giving you advice on good habits, and giving you simple things that you can think about in game, with the hope, with the need that you don't just follow only what I say, maybe in the short term, but in the long term, that you actually use what I say to like inspire you to coach yourself, right? There's no such thing like as a team, as a player that is successful strictly off of the coach's impact. The players have to be able to coach themselves. Like I think the most coach-oriented team that I have ever known or worked with was the London Spitfire in 2023. When they crapped around on dive, did a terrible job, couldn't do anything, and then went like Symmetra, whatever. And Christopher and X, I know, spent a lot of time locking down every single TP spot, a breakdown on how to play every single map. And they played a comp where they could essentially flowchart it, right? They could flowchart almost everything. And even with that team, which was the most one-dimensional, coach-led, alpha chad, genius, simple composition in the world, still demanded players of Hadi, Backbone, Landon's intelligence to be able to execute that on and make adjustments on the fly. And most teams have nowhere near that level of coaching impact, at least in that regard. A lot more of it's cultural, a lot more of it's coaching the basics of the game, and so on. Right, exactly. So the funny thing is the vast majority of successful players are successful on their own merit. And the most coaching impact that I've ever had is establishing basic systems, enabling smart players to do smart things, and at teaching the basics of the game. Like, we need to be taking an off angle. This is how we communicate, right? This is, the timing is important. Like teaching
giving them the concrete, and the asphalt and the bricks and the mortar by which they build their building. And maybe even you, even at the highest level, like it just doesn't, you need people that are smart, right? And certainly for individual improvement and for ranking up improvement, you need to be able to coach yourself, like coach, not like live coach, but like you need to be able to give yourself feedback. You need to be able to have goals. You need to be able to have a good schedule where you enjoy the game, and so on. So I think without reading the context of this post, the title of this post is accurate. It is true. It's not even a question of like, oh, it's an opinion. No, I think it's fact. I do think it's overrated. I really do. I do think it's overrated. I think that's why I put so much work on making sure that I'm not just giving you tips and tricks. I guess we can just keep it full screen here, because that only gets you so far. Okay, so a very small percentage of the player base gets coached for encouragement or because they think that's how things should be done. After learning the fundamentals of the game through the game's tips and some videos on YouTube, there's almost nothing that coaches have to offer. And this is what I completely disagree with. I think I see this a lot about like why you shouldn't get coaching. Oh, it's just like you could just get tips and tricks for free. How many of you guys have watched my Tracer video or my Tracer coaching sessions? Why is he saying bookmark? How many of you guys have seen my Tracer coaching sessions? I know I have worked with a couple people who have watched every single one of my Tracer coaching sessions. I know people that have watched like 15, 20, 30 of my Tracer coaching sessions. Like you guys might need to see a doctor about that, right? But like seriously, okay? If you've watched one of my Tracer VOD reviews, especially one of my recent ones, right? There are differences in each session, especially in how I communicate the ideas. But usually it all boils down to about the same thing. Off angles, timing, shoot what's available. It's like the same thing. So what's the point of watching it? Because it's not about new information. It's about how it's presented. It's about catering to the person, providing feedback directly, communicating, meshing, and it's scientifically proven that it is easier to learn, understand, and relate with feedback when you have a relationship with the person you're talking with. That's why I do the form. You guys want to know? Okay, you guys want to leak? Okay, you guys want a little insight as to how I coach? I'm letting my big man, think of it up, by the way. So I'm letting out trade secrets. So any of you coaches out there, congratulations. You're going to be able to steal ideas from me. 90% of the value of the form is not the facts of the form about what they need to be better or their training schedule or even things like sleep. I mean, it's important, but it's more because it sparks a conversation. It gets us talking. Not just even about the game, but about their life, what they enjoy, what's frustrating about the game, what got them into Overwatch. I want to know them because I will be a more effective coach helping them to remember these ideas and learn and improve better if I develop a little relationship with them. And it's not even like I'm trying to be their friends. Like, oh, it's like I'm interested in them. I want to know, right? You're a more effective coach when you do these things. And that's why there's a lot of coaches out there that aren't as effective because they don't have that part of their coaching. It's just gameplay. And it's like, you're not going to be as good at coaching if you don't at least develop a mini little bit of a relationship about like what's going on with their life or what they enjoy about Overwatch. That's very important. And that's why this is false, right? It's I understand where this conception comes from, but it's false. You have to build a relationship with people. And it's also learning games tips and learning the fundamentals of the game, how it applies to a character, I think is very important. And I think it's not always something like, even I don't really have a video on the fundamentals of Tracer unless you go to my coaching sessions. Right? Exactly, Winter Cal. The ability of someone to talk with you one-on-one and explain things one-on-one and answer your questions directly, and people are unique with unique problems, is very important. Right. You can learn alone by practicing and using your brain and improve at the same rate, if not better, as one who got coached. And I disagree with this as well. I would say generally getting coaching is almost always useful, just to have a second set of eyes or a little bit of feedback. I got coaching once. I was exposed on my rank anxiety. I was exposed on my lack of cover. And you could hold me at gunpoint, and I could not remember a single detail about the rest of that coaching session. But do you know what it changed about me? It made me a lot more serious about playing and a lot more self-critical. And that alone was the price of the session. This was like 6 years ago. Because I was a lot more self-critical of myself. And so I taught myself because of the mindset that I kind of adopted after that coaching session. Now, not everybody's like that. That's why coaching doesn't always work. Some people are just bad. and stupid and don't want to improve. There's 20, 35% of the people that I work with, maybe more, that I'm going to work with and I'm going to enjoy working with, but I know they're not going to rank up because they're not serious. But that's their problem, not the coaching session's problem. So it makes you think about it. It makes you think about it more. All right. A coach that almost doesn't play the game is going to miss some errors that a GM player in a platform playing a specific would have seen since they don't play a game. This is also objectively false. I don't understand where this perception comes from. I think it's because the people posting this, no offense to Cassie's girlfriend, just don't have enough real life experience, or maybe they just haven't thought about this. There's not a single sport on earth where the coach is as physically capable as a professional. There's not a single sport, basketball, football, baseball, track, heck, even board games or other video games, even mathematics or topics. Sometimes the person teaching you, I was a good algebra teacher, even though I was only able to get to I only did calculus and only barely calculus. Not because but because I was really good at as a teenager even, just communicating ideas and explaining things and asking questions, right? So there is not a single person in the world. Coaches are not designed to be coaches because they're good at the game, because they know everything about the game and can communicate it well. And the best part about it as well is a lot of people say that they know a lot of stuff, they just might not know the micro. That's not even true either. There are, I would say on average, higher level. If you want to know the micro of a character, the highest level, ask a One Trick and GM Plus. But I can tell you 85-90% of the Wrecking Ball micro that's relevant for most players up into the Grandmaster top 500 level. Why? Because I studied the game? Because I watch and take notes? Does that not occur to people? And this is, I don't know why it's so specific to Overwatch, but I see this all the time. It's better than it used to be. I think people generally have understood that, but it's actually shocking how this is parroted in Overwatch, and yet it doesn't even make sense if you think about it for even 30 seconds. For even 30 seconds, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't apply to anywhere outside of Overwatch, so why would it apply in Overwatch? Oh, and another myth as well, the difference between a coach and a player is not mechanics. That's only one of the things. The thing that's even more or just as important as mechanics is the ability to make game sense decisions on the fly. You guys watched me play Winston on Thursday, right? How many bad decisions did I make with Winston? Right? Now, I want you to imagine myself going back and reviewing myself playing Winston, coaching myself playing Winston. I would catch every single mistake. Why? Because it's happening in slow motion, because I have time to think about it. Because the ability to be a pro player is not just the mechanics, but the ability to make these decisions on the fly quickly, not because you're a quick thinker, but because you've done them so many times, you don't even have to think at all. You don't even have to think at all. You just act. I don't play Winston enough. I haven't played Winston seriously in 4 years. So I don't have that repetition that good Winston players have. Let me give you guys an example. If Overwatch was played at 0.1 speed, I would be a top 500 Winston because I would have the time to think. But I don't have the time to think, so I can't use my coaching skills. Now, you notice that what's funny is my Winston is probably pretty darn good between fights. My setup phase is really good because I have time to think. But as soon as my decision making goes down the toilet, Yeah, I agree with that poke. I think that if you can do a little bit of both, I think it can be useful. But I also know a lot of coaches that overemphasize the value of their play, and I think that they actually the best coaches that I know are actually the worst players because they put time into coaching and learning how to coach and studying external resources and studying the game, right? If I can't be good at Overwatch because I don't have time to, I'm trying to better myself as a coach with a million other things, studying the game, learning how to coach, learning how to communicate better, coaching repetition. The problem is that you can't be good at the game and coach because being good at the game takes time away from coaching. So being really good at the game will compromise your ability as a coach. It's like saying, oh, I would be a much better athlete if I did an hour of abs every day. Maybe, but think about what you're not doing with that. Think about how many physical resources that you're burning that could be spent in probably more pertinent athletic or muscular skills. Good players are usually good intuitively, so not great at coaching, right? A lot of the time, yes. Yes. There are exceptions. But yes, there are some really good players out there that are like coaches out there that are really good players. And I think sometimes that those coaches should think about the way that they approach the game. Maybe study other people's VOD reviews, take some notes, reevaluate some things, because I don't think that their coaches are right with a lot of things. Okay. I have seen some coaching videos, and some of them the coach goes through the VOD review. What does he tell the person? Tell me now. Where should you have positioned yourself? When you should watch the VOD, you're not under pressure. There are no enemies shooting at you and things you should be doing. So of course the person will usually come with the correct answer. They're learning how coaching works, right? The game isn't about coming with an answer in a VOD review, but coming with a correct answer fast and under pressure while playing the game. Guys, look at this. You're almost there. You're almost there, Cassie's girlfriend. You're almost there. You're so close to understanding the value of coaching here. You're almost there. You're almost there, buddy. You almost got it. You're just one step away. He tells you should be more creative with your positioning. Okay, does this guy watching my VOD reviews? This guy has to be talking about me. This is me. Guys. I didn't know this was about me. All right. You should be more creative with your positioning. Of course, it's common sense. And if it wasn't common sense, the person would have figured it out after some time playing against other people. It's just hard to do in game. And this is the false thing. Some people don't. Some people hit their head against the wall over and over and over again. And this is why, if you guys have noticed recently, I've been doing a lot more live coaching, because they'll say, okay, you need to be more creative in positioning. You need to take more off angles. Oh, yeah, thank you for that. Okay, let's go into a game and let's practice doing that. And you'd be surprised that while giving it intense focus, that these players don't necessarily play better, but they do practice making decisions fast and under pressure. They flub it, but they do it over and over and over and over again. And all of a sudden, they're actually able to make these decisions fast and under pressure. See, that's one reason why I'm glad I climbed a Grandmaster, 4.2K back in Overwatch 1. Because I wanted to prove that I could, first off. But that the process of improvement was setting really simple goals and then just practicing those things over and over and over and over and over again. We'll see, Pit Boss. So did the person learn something from that and in a way that will improve his gameplay and rank? I'd say he didn't learn anything or almost nothing. This is pessimistic. I would say most people that I work with definitely learn something, but let's say that they're right. Because there have been some sessions where I straight up told the person, bro, you didn't learn anything from this here, but you did understand what you need to be putting emphasis on in your own gameplay. They didn't necessarily learn anything more about their game, but they learned something more about their game, what they were lacking. They understood that angles are important, but oh wow, I didn't realize that I was that bad at angles, or how much emphasis I need to do. And then usually, especially recently, we've actually put the time of getting them in game and practicing doing what I want them to do. And he paid for VOD review because he saw others doing that and heard all the praise from a very small group of people about the coach and was impressed by things, linking them without understanding them. Why? The coach also made for a GM player one of the worst analogies of my life. Let's say you were learning how to drive. You need to practice staying in the middle of the line. Oh my gosh. This is me, guys. This is me. I remember this analogy, I think. Let's say you're learning how to drive. You need to practice staying in the middle of the line. So the instructor says, occasionally tells you, hey, stay in the middle of the line. Good work. That's how you should practice in Overwatch. Yeah, so the idea here is that when you're driving, there's a lot of things that you're thinking about at once. Right? There's a lot of things that you're thinking about at once. Yeah, certified hater. Here we go. So what you can do is having somebody to remind you of those fundamentals, of those basics over and over again can be useful. Right? Now, maybe driving wasn't the best analogy because maybe you can't emphasize one thing too much because you're operating heavy machinery here. You know what I'm saying? But the idea is that in general, this is how coaching works with anything, is that you do drill something and then you drill something and then you drill something and you let some of the other stuff go just so you're able to work on one thing. If you only focus on staying in the middle of the lane, you'll end up causing a traffic accident. For people that don't have a driving license, you need to check the mirrors and switching lanes, make turns. If you don't, you'll end up hitting another vehicle. You need to actively look for pedestrians when you have a green light. But see, this is the problem though. This is the problem. This is where I agree the analogy plays out, but this is not how Overwatch works. So when you're new to a game, every step that you do is learning. Everything is a crash course. Everything, you make mistakes with everything that you do. So you can just play and just get better just by playing. But the problem is that generally people start to calcify. They build habits that are good and they build habits that are bad, and then they stop changing. The average player is like this. Most players are like this. If you want to talk about talent, it's the type of players that are generally able to be self-aware and continue to improve, and most players aren't like that because you do have to be exceptional to get the higher ranks. So you can't focus on everything for eternity. You can't focus on things for eternity. The reason why this analogy works for a GM player, ironically, and not for the learning how to drive, okay, is that a GM player already knows how to drive. But like, let's say that they have a bad habit with forgetting to check their mirrors. This is where an instructor says, you already know how to drive, but I'm going to be in there telling you to check your mirrors every 2 minutes. So you're right. If this analogy is lacking in terms of the execution, because this is more applicable for somebody that is already driving, already knows how to drive, but needs to improve one aspect. And that's where the coaching is useful. See, because this is the thing. When you're brand new, I teach. When you're not brand new, I coach. Does that make sense? I give you advice about what you need to work on and then have you rep it over and over and over again. The John Wooden says there's 4 steps to coaching, okay? Or 7 steps. Let me see if I can remember. It is, shoot. Let me make sure that I'm getting these in correct order here. I have them written down. Give me 1 second here. I just wrote it down the other week. I actually was thinking about making a video about it, because it's some great advice. Yes, here it is. Okay, it's demonstration, it's explanation, demonstration, imitation, then repetition. So explanation, we'll put an E there. How do I do it? Demonstration, this is how it's done. This is the explaining how the game works. Demonstration is showing them in the replay viewer. Do you see what it would look like if you were here? Do you see what I'm looking like here? Then it is imitation. Okay, now I want you to try and do what we talked about in the replay viewer. Let's go into a live coaching session. That's why live coaching is really important if you can do it, right? And then you just do it over and over and over and over again, right? The thing is that a lot of time high-ranked players don't need the explanation as much. Sometimes they do. And sometimes they don't even need the demonstration. They just need somebody to be in their ear. I've had people, brilliant players, come to me and gold. They know how the game works. They just don't know how to put it into practice, right? And that's, again, where coaching is useful. You get somebody in your ear telling you how exactly you need to be, what kind of mindset you need to be going in. And you're right that is where coaching is limited. Once you get them in that mindset, they really have to learn how to apply that mindset on their own. But saying that a coaching can't help with that is crazy. Oh gosh, this is like the most schizo breakdown of a bad analogy. Not even a bad analogy. I don't even remember the context here. I'm taking their word for it, but regardless. Okay. I can provide a link to that video. Oh, please do. You have to combine. In game, I can tell who listened to his advice based on gameplay. Rare, but it happens. It looks ridiculous. Oh, man. I can tell they're a Spilo student. What? The game is about combining things together, so your practice should mirror that. No, it should not. No, it should not. You should. Okay, so you guys, all right, I want you guys to watch something with me. I'm going to subtly plug a very, very useful video. All right? Because you're almost there. You're almost there, but you're just not quite. You're just not quite. Skills. I want you guys to listen to this video, because I learned something from this video, right? You're almost there. This is a 4-minute video, and I want you guys to shut up and listen, because this might be the most important 4 minutes of your week.
Are hard to learn because you can't break them apart into smaller pieces. A skill like brewing a cup of tea involves a discrete set of steps that can each be practiced alone. Pick up the kettle, pour the water, put the kettle down. You could practice each part separately and then put them together without too much difficulty. But many skills involve interdependent parts. Playing StarCraft, for instance, involves a bunch of different skills that all depend on each other. You have to collect resources, build buildings and units, scout your opponent, attack, defend, retreat, and overall respond organically to what your opponent is doing. Your overall skill level depends on the interaction of all these different component skills, but you can't really practice them separately either. So how do you get practice at a highly interdependent skill like this? There are many ways you might go about it, but a very simple and effective way is just to change what you pay attention to. An old study on a video game that...
Does that sound familiar? Change what you pay attention to. Have you guys seen any of my live coaching? Any of my live coaching? Think creatively about your positioning. Not, right? Does that sound familiar? The guy criticized me for saying this exact same thing. All right, let's keep going.
I guarantee you have never played before, called Space Fortress, illustrates this idea pretty well. Not this one, not this one, that's the one. Space Fortress, like StarCraft, involves a lot of interacting parts. The researchers split learners into 4 different groups. The control group played the game for about 6.5 hours over the course of 10 different practice sessions. The other 3 groups played the game for the same amount of time over the same number of sessions, but the researchers gave some special instructions to these groups. Researchers instructed Group 2 to pay attention to the ship controls over the first 6 sessions. And the last 4 sessions, they just played the game just like the control did. Controlling the ship is pretty critical to doing well in the game. Researchers told Group 3 to pay attention to the placement of mines around their ship. Mine placement is also apparently another important aspect of doing well at the game. And the 4th group was instructed to pay attention to ship control for the first 3 sessions, mine placement for the next 3 sessions, and then, like the other groups, the last 4 sessions are the same as the control. They're not told to pay attention to anything in particular. Notice that if you were just to look at this from the outside, every group seems to be doing the exact same thing for the same amount of time. The only difference is what the groups are paying attention to. In the beginning, the groups started out basically the same, but over time, as the power of attention began to take hold, group differences started to emerge. After 6 sessions, the control group, which had just played the game but didn't have any particular instructions about what to pay attention to, they were scoring about 1,000 points. The 2 groups who had focused on one aspect of the game for those first 6 sessions were scoring about 1,500 points per game. And the 4th group, who had focused on 2 different aspects of the game during those first...
Notice that the people that focused on something did not dramatically improve better than the gray folks at all. In fact, the noticeable gap of focusing on one thing really only showed later in practice. Just remember that next time that you get feedback. You're not going to be improving immediately. If you ever immediately improve after feedback, it's because of the confidence. It's not because you're able to implement the feedback perfectly.
First 6 sessions was scoring about just on 2 different aspects of the game during those first 6 sessions, was scoring about 2,000 points per game. After that, all groups continued to play the game like normal for the next 4 sessions. But that didn't stop Group 4. They continued to learn more than Groups 1, 2, and 3 over the next 4 sessions. This is a finding that has been replicated in various other contexts as well. Paying attention to just one aspect of the skill helps our brain to create meaningful building blocks for the more complex skill. We can pay less attention to the other parts, build the pieces we need, and then integrate them together over time. So the next time you are faced with learning a complex, interdependent skill, try this method out. Just pay attention to one aspect of the skill for a little while, then pay attention to another aspect of the skill, and maybe another aspect of the skill, then come back to that original thing that you worked on again. I'm willing to bet that you would get greater learning gains that way than if you were to just practice while trying to pay attention to everything equally all at once. For more on how attention
Okay. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand the analogy here with Overwatch? Developing one skill at a time, changing that skill. And then this is something that I learned. This was about 6 to 7 months ago. But allowing time for you to just play, to try and put it all together, right? To not constantly, I've told some of my students, maybe some of you guys have heard this, that I want you to have maybe a day a week where you just play to win. You just try to put it all together. Because this person, again, like this person they understand, they're so close. They're so close. But this is why it's so important that you understand these things, right? And I think what ends up happening is that we can get very caught up in overthinking things, right? A lot of this is just common sense. It's just common sense. You focus on one thing at a time. It's how anything and anywhere is learned. And in these complex skills, sometimes we feel like we're not allowed to apply the rules of the game, but that's not true. Sometimes you gotta be comfortable with losing some games because you're putting extra attention onto your positioning. As we saw, the lines were not going way higher immediately. So if you focus on one aspect of your gameplay, it will negatively impact other aspects of your gameplay. Yes, it will. Yes. He's so close. Because you practice them less. Well, you're not practicing them at all if you're not focusing on anything anyway and not combined with other things. Right, exactly. What I find silly about this post is that in real sports, athletes don't just play the game to practice. They practice specific skills to improve. Why would Overwatch be different? And that goes the same thing with like, why are, high-ranked players not better coaches than coaches? It's the same thing. It's like people somehow get in this Overwatch mindset and they just forget everything that they've learned about life, whether it's from their school or sports or literally anything else. And like, oh, it's different. No, it's not. It's the same thing. This is the same thing. I coach this stuff in mixed martial arts. How do you guys think people get better at jujitsu? Or MMA. You don't throw them into the ring and say, fight. No, you have to. We're going to do it over and over again. Jab, cross, guard. Work on your footwork. All right, let's practice that together. All right, now let's go back and drill the individual aspects over and over again. You practice the whole, you practice the part. You practice the whole, you practice the part. It's over and over and over again, right? But this is in before somebody says, wait, you were coaching MMA? Can you beat Conor McGregor in a 1v1? Or if you can't, then you're a fraudulent coach. And I could, by the way. Okay. Another thing I saw a coach complimenting someone's aim based on how well he did on Vaxta. And another coach telling that Vaxta isn't good for practice. And another video suggesting Vaxta. Oh my days. If this person is still talking about me, why would I not recommend Vaxta? Why would I recommend Vaxta? Why would I? Vaxta is good for warm-up for hit scan players, because they can just focus on their aim. But it's not great for flankers, tracers, and Genjis, and so on. Again, this person is looking at it from total ignorance and then says that, oh, he's inconsistent in the advice. Well, because that's because everybody is different and the heroes that they play are different. Vax is good for some characters, bad for other characters. Unbelievable how that's the case. Vax doesn't tell how good someone's aim is because they're not under pressure. Well, thank you, Captain Obvious. It's I guess, guys, that you're not allowed to aim train or warm up unless you're under pressure, I guess. Thank you, Cassie's girlfriend. Vaxa didn't help me to improve my aim because in Vaxa, you're not under pressure. Interesting. So you're only allowed to develop skills under pressure? Interesting. It's impossible. Okay, let me give you guys a question. Have you guys, okay, let's go with the driver's ed analogy. Have you guys ever taken a driver's ed class? Have you guys ever done the driver's ed testing? They will not put you on the road until you can, on a driveway or a parking lot, drive around cones. Until you can do that, they will not put you on the road. Why? Because if you can't do it not under pressure, then you can't do it under pressure. So driving around cones is useful, especially if you're a brand new driver. My dad did it with me, not with cones specifically, but in the parking lot, because I wanted to make sure that I was good enough not under pressure, so then I could translate the skill under pressure. That's why Vax is useful, not just for warm-up, so that you're able to practice some of your mechanics not under pressure, and then trying to apply it in the real world. It's scaling. You don't just drop somebody into the deep end. You put them with a little, 3 or 4 years old, you put little flippers on in the water, all right? The shallow end, right? You don't throw them face first in. Again, this is just stuff that you take it outside of Overwatch, and this sentence is just absolutely brain dead. And again, I'm not correcting this just to punch down in some random Redditor who has, I think, some good ideas here. It's because, it's not even because I need to defend my reputation here. I don't need to defend my reputation versus random people on the internet. I'm not at that point where that's a problem for me. The problem is that this stuff is out there for a lot of people, or at least is in the back of their minds. And even if you guys don't think this is a good reminder of why this stuff matters. I saw a VOD review of someone playing in my rank and with my hero. The coach, who doesn't play much, didn't see some of his mistakes that I as a person, oh my gosh. This is my favorite one. My favorite one is when I get the backseat Andes. I have these YouTube comments. I have to delete them sometimes because they're so insulting. But sometimes they're not insulting. So the backseat Andes, they say, why didn't you tell him to do this? Why didn't you coach him about that? Chat, why don't I pick up all the time on details? Why don't I draw to light? Why didn't you say that he made that mistake there? You guys just saw what I coached today. You guys remember the Ramatra coaching session today? There was a lot of goof ups with the cover and sometimes even a little bit of stuff with the target priority and a perfect placement of the cooldown usage that we didn't talk about. Why? Am I a fraud? Am I a fraud? No. Too much, lowest hanging fruit. They're not, right, exactly. You need, sometimes what matters with the player most is not that stuff. Sometimes what they need to hear, it's what's most important is something this. And so we put the other stuff aside. It's distractions. We focus on this. It's okay. Let's really work on your mindset. Like, and for that player that we worked with today, it wasn't even necessarily the gameplay. It was like his mentality going into scrimmages was screwing with him, right? Okay, imagine if I had gone with a Ramatra player today and started lambasting him about him dying with shield up and nemesis form. Like, I would have been an absolute fraud of a coach if I had done that. An absolute fraud. Absolute fraud. You sometimes have to overlook things. Now, does that mean that you always overlook little things? No. In fact, if you've seen some of my sessions, I just had a Silver Sojourn coaching session just this week. Will be posted on Spilo 2 later on. And Silver, we talked more about micro than we did about positioning. I know, can you believe it? A coaching session not talking about off angles. You want to know why? Because his off angles were actually okay. But he had a lot of really bad mechanical habits. And so we talked about those mechanical habits because they kept popping up. We talked about his jumping. We talked about a little bit about trigger discipline. We talked a lot about his disruptor shot placement was often at chest height when it needed to be at the floor. So those little things, because they amplified every single fight, they needed to be corrected. And ironically, we didn't nitpick as much some of the off-angle stuff because it wasn't a huge issue. It was an off-angle. So you need to recognize patterns. You need to read what's important to the player. You need to be able to quickly prioritize stuff. Right. Exactly, Aerothal. So this is, again, something that would make absolutely crazy. Like I've worked with coaches in my life who obsessed over little details and like went over every single thing that they did wrong. And they were the worst. They're the absolute worst. They lack the social awareness to be like, hey, I get it. Like, can we move on? Or like and they'd give me a shopping list. And I remember like, I always felt very overwhelmed and feel like I learned a lot. And if you guys have ever had somebody like that too, it's exhausting, right? It's exhausting. So it's just, again, this is just outside of Overwatch. Nobody thinks like this, right? I remember, it's funny though. It's kind of, actually, that's not even true necessarily. I remember there was this is going to be a throwback. There was a Lord of the Rings Online 6v6, little like an internal scrimmage stuff that people were doing, and I was participating in them. And I was playing a new class. This is a long time ago. And I was setting myself some goals of like how I needed to practice some ability usage because I kept messing up this combo. And I was playing this class, I had to do like 20 different things. And I was like a little overwhelmed. So I was really like prioritizing, like building the habits of a couple of skills. And dude, people could not understand that I would be like, well, why aren't you doing this and this and this and this? You're just bad. I'm like, well, no, I've never played this before. So I'm going to focus. And they're like, no, well, why don't you just, it's like people are just, they'd have no concept of how to improve at anything. And it shows. It shows. That's why people don't get good at stuff. That's what you don't want to know. Like, that's why. Okay, I don't know. It's crazy to me like how many people like struggle to learn things and then they don't actually learn how to learn. Anyway, he told him things that were common sense, nothing out of this world, no ingenuity. This makes me mad. This makes me mad. My favorite part is when people, this one does hit a little too close to home, where people are like, oh, Spilo is like good for basics and stuff, but he doesn't. This is how you get good at Overwatch. Go watch a CarQ video if you want, or not, And by the way, CarQ makes good content, good tips. This is not at all versus CarQ, but like you don't need ingenuity necessarily. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you need to be creative. Sometimes, but ingenuity. John Wooden is very famous for being like, he actually was a self-described not that smart strategic coach, but he just had a system, was good at explaining it, and kept players accountable and gave them over and over and over again. This is because, you know why people like this? Because it's sexy. It's sexy. It's fun. It's exciting. Oh, I didn't think about that. It's actually funny. There's a pattern between Coaching sessions that I had back when I was a less experienced coach, where I come up with this crazy new, like, oh wait, like a detail, like, oh, and the player's like excited, and then it doesn't like really actually do anything. It's not exciting. The player would have picked himself up if he just played a little bit more. Not likely. Remember the system, right? Remember, the coach's job is to direct your attention or to give you habits, right? And the funny thing is too, is a lot of times people don't realize how bad they are at fundamentals until they see it from another person's perspective. How many times have I gone into a coaching session with a player that's familiar with the concept of off angles, but doesn't realize that how much they're trolling without it? The more you know the basics, the more your mind has room for creativity. Yes. So you can even VOD review yourself. Yes, we love that. That's great. That's important. That's crucial. I've made 2 guides on it. It's so important. I should probably do another one that's more up to date on how to do any more. Great. And play worse after that, because in your mind you pictured how you should play, but it's hard to play because you're under pressure. Oh no, we were so close. We were so we were so close. You had me in the first half. So how should coaching be? I don't really know. I never claimed to be a coach, but I have an idea. Only do live coaching. And when you do live coaching, try to instill how high-ranked players think in the person getting coached as they play. Like what? How does a higher-ranked player think? You tell me. How does a higher-ranked player think? See, that's the problem. That's the problem. You know what's an absolute myth? That higher-ranked players think more than you do? At one point, maybe that was true on their path to improvement, but they don't think more than you do. They don't think more than you do. I don't think anymore right now as a barely masters, washed up old man than I did when I was a bronze or silver player. In fact, I thought more as a bronze and a silver player because I knew less and had fewer skills. So I had to think a lot harder to try and do what I thought to do, and I wasn't very good at it. I think less now. Now, you might have to think to get to that point. But the reason the high-ranked players are good is because they've thought and done things these little things so many times that they just do it, right? Build the quote-unquote muscle memory. Yeah, it's just instinctual action. It's pattern recognition is what it is. You know, you know what? Screw this guy. I'm going to use the car driving analogy. When you drive a car and you see a stop sign, you're not thinking, stop sign. Oh! Stop sign. No, it just happens. Like it's like a pixel of your brain. Like it's one neuron, right? It doesn't even happen, right? And that's why you guys ever notice the joke about like whenever you're looking at directions, you always have to turn down the radio because there's too much going on, right? Anytime that you have to think, you can really only focus. There's multitasking doesn't exist. High-ranked players only multitask because they're not thinking about anything. It just happens. It's just a mechanical response. But to get to that point, takes conscious practice. Too predictable? Hey, listen, that's right. No ingenuity. I should have torn down this guy's arguments with more ingenuity. That's right. I was too strict to the facts. I needed much better analogies, a lot more charisma. Yeah, my bad. So we need to instill how high-ranked players think. You know what how high-ranked players think? Yeah, tracer. So it's Kiri. Okay, next fight. Do you think they're thinking? Like, come on, guys. They're just playing the game. So how do you get to that point, right? You know? Come on. Like, they're not like, well, they're calculated this, and then I knew that they're going to do. Like, those calculations when they're happening are just happening so fast that it's not even a calculation. Like, here's the analogy for you guys. What's 1 + 1? You didn't have to think. It just didn't answer. 7 × 7. Now, some of you guys had to think. Some of you guys didn't do enough arithmetic in elementary school. 12 × 12? 13 × 13. 8 divided by 4. 25 divided by 5. Right? You get what I'm saying? If those things aren't happening instantly, it's not that you need to be thinking, oh, you're dumb, your brain doesn't work. It's you need to think about those things, do those things over and over and over again until the answer literally just pops in your brain. I'm a big phonics guy, right? I think phonics is a great way to learn how to read. Probably the best way I think the best way to learn how to read. But the goal of phonics is not so that you sound out every word for the history of time, but I just sight read. I memorize how every word looks. But if I ever come across a word I don't know, I sound it out, nothing, because I know how to do it. So I have that system just in case I need it. But I just bam, 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 bam. I don't think about reading. It just happens. Am I hooked? Oh, I'm definitely hooked. Can you offer to coach cast a girlfriend? No? You want to know why? You want to know?
As a dyslexic,
I might go
confirm
Palato, yes.
works.
Yes. In fact, part of the reason why dyslexia is worse with sight wording is because the number of shapes looks familiar until you break it down. Okay, so chat. Why would I not want to coach cast a girlfriend? Tell me why. Go back to the very start of our conversation. Why would I not coach cast a girlfriend? Why would I not do it? Hello? Yes, great point. He doesn't want coaching. Right, he or she doesn't want coaching. Right. They've already made up so it's not that it's the biggest factor in a coach is your relationship with a coach and your interest in the coaching. They don't want coaching. I'm not gonna offer coaching. It wouldn't do anything. It wouldn't do anything. I'm not good enough to you can't teach motivation. You can create an environment if you're working with somebody for a long time, but that it's almost a social or emotional thing at that point. You know, I'm not saying this person is stupid. I'm not saying right. Sometimes it's good. This is a good like if it's bad information, shut it out, right? But yeah. So. Right. If you don't, you can't get clean if you don't want it. What was the comment about language? I'm gonna go back and read this here. It's like learning a language. Actually, at the beginning, you have to translate everything, but at one point, you don't need any more. Everything makes sense. Right. Exactly. It's crazy to me though that it's just like anybody that's learned anything knows this stuff, and yet this is not just the casty girlfriend. This is like a lot of people think this. I think the largest issue is that coaches are really thinking from the level and perspective of the student. Yes, this is really, really important. This is why it's so important that you're like asking a lot of questions. The irony here is that this person is being critical of me for asking questions when that's exactly why I do it. You got to get to the root cause of like what this player's thinking and why they're making that decisions. And honestly, I'm not perfect at doing that. I'm really trying to work at that. Oh, it's temporal. Temporal swinging in. If you don't think this can help players, your issue isn't with coaches with reviews. I do think VOD reviews are very important, but something that you shouldn't repeat. Let's put it this way. Once you've VOD reviewed, that's why I rarely do multiple VOD reviews back to back, especially if I'm repeatedly coaching somebody, because at some point you just need to practice applying the information. You don't need more new information. I think VOD review is a good initial opener, but then ultimately you do want to go back and apply it. It's you can have too much protein. You know what I'm saying? When I do them 1 month apart, sure. I mean, I think self-VOD review is good. I think keeping a status check on stuff, but ultimately like a good, nice, long 30, 45 minute VOD review is like, that's a once a month, once every 2 month thing is really. Yeah, exactly, Poke. You good? Yeah. I think that live coaching is a little underrated. I've learned to like it more once you actually have a concept to practice, because it helps the player get in the right framework mentally of how to practice, you know? So if you guys have watched me do live coaching, it's not really spitting, telling them what to do, but telling them one thing to do over and over and over again. Remember the video that we just watched, the 4-minute video? It's like where to put their attention. That's the value of live coaching, is saying, yo, idiot, this is where you're putting your attention. I don't even necessarily tell them how to do it. I just tell them to put their attention on it, right? The dent in my head, oh yeah, I got some nasty... Heavy second to this. Nowadays, most coaching and games knowledge can be found free from YouTubers Wizard Yang and Coach OC. I mean, we talked about that already. The innate abilities aspect. A person can hire the best basketball coaches, but the coaches can only help you if so much the player. J3, but like, what innate abilities? Reaction time? Wildly overrated. Wildly overrated. Quick thinking. How do you develop quick thinking? Mouse control. How are these players just naturally good? Where's the science on this? There is? Based off of what? Chess and juggling related to innate abilities? No, they're not. In fact, okay, this is a funny thing. You guys want to know something funny? Here's something funny. The first story in this book is about somebody that wanted to prove that innate talent was mostly overrated by training their children in chess from the early age. And shockingly, they were world-class chess players, both of his girls. Now you could say, oh, well, there's something that you learn in childhood. And I would agree with that. I think that there is I made a video about this, like some of the skills that you develop earlier in life help you to get better at other things. Like, let's say that you've never played first-person shooters, that you have no competitive experience whatsoever at all, no strategy experience at all. Yeah, you might have a harder time with Overwatch. Doesn't mean that you can't get there. It just might take more work. What I've learned more often than not, that talent is desire. If you are more inclined to enjoy chess, you're more likely to get good at chess. So if we're talking about innate abilities, it's the enjoyment of what you're doing. And I think that's where people get confused. Because besides reaction time, quick thinking and mouse control, that practice. Like, I remember people used to say, oh, you must have like photographic memory, or like you're like a freaking Rain Man out there with your math abilities. But you know what I did? I just did my times tables. My dad made me do my times tables in addition when I was like 7 and 8 years old. That's it. And most of these kids I knew never did that. Like, I knew these kids. I knew they never did basic arithmetic. So no, they're like, oh, you're gifted. And that used to really hurt my feelings, because that downplayed the amount of work that put in. And so then, see, no offense to electronic device, is this downplays the work put in. I had no first-person shooter experience going into this game. Zero. I was playing on a laptop on like 60,000 EDPI with ranked anxiety, no idea what I was doing. And the educational stuff back there was terrible. And I got to Grandmaster on largely my own merit, because I played about 3 hours a day with goals over and over and over and over again for over a year. It's insulting. It's insulting. This should be a cold water take. I mean, it's not. It's there's no science at all to back yourself up on this. Let's see, this is more Spilo stuff. It goes over the student thinks it's necessary, if they want to do live coaching. So one is kind of which angle student. You'll notice he doesn't say the player's going to play better, because they aren't. It's hard to do well so many yapping here. The point is not to win, it's to learn the concept. He then goes over the game they just did, and they figure out together if the decision the student made the correct ones. The point is to give the student the tools to analyze their own gameplay when practicing the skill, rather than say you slowly explain the way you made it. Right, and that's the key thing, right? If I can succeed in making the player like be able to be self-aware, that's the most important thing, right? Because that's what they're going to be able to take out of the session, right? Hopefully, it's an understanding of, even if it's just a little bit better, right? Everyone has a gift, but a lot of times it's that deep childhood interest. I agree. I 100% agree. I think that the talent is the childhood interest of the things that you were developed doing. I think the only thing, okay, what's interesting is, you guys want to know, like, the only thing here that is like, quote unquote, they proved that there was talent that they found out, at least that's non like height, bone density related, right? It was actually, I think, perfect pitch. Perfect pitch. And actually, if I remember correctly, there is an example of somebody teaching themselves perfect pitch, but it took like an ungodly amount of time when they were older. At a certain age, for whatever reason, it doesn't work. Now, the irony is that perfect pitch is not even that good. It doesn't really help you. It's not much of a use for as a music. And in many ways, it can actually be obnoxious. It can actually be a hindrance. Governed by culture? I don't know. I'm just telling you what I read from the book. So if the science has changed in the last 10 years, you do me. There you go, Alexa. Alexa is evolving. You're thinking of relative pitch. Well, relative pitch, I feel like comes with practice. I've learned relative pitch. I'm talking about perfect pitch. That's why I said perfect pitch. Because my point was that, again, that it felt almost impossible to teach perfect pitch. Yeah. An example of one of those rare skills that I think does come like early on and then is pretty much impossible to learn later on. The book is Peak. Yeah, you can absolutely learn to sing. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a fairly silly post, but I am grateful for this person for giving their opinion and doing so, I mean, respectfully. Like, I mean, you don't have to agree to be considered respectful, right? Like, you can say a critical thing. Wait, where did it go? Okay, there it is. You can disagree and be respectful. And I feel like this person was like, from their stance and their position, they clearly had some issues, right? And I think that there's a lot of there's a lot of fair criticism, a lot of good ideas floating around in here. It just isn't there. They're just not quite there. So I think the big priority I hope you guys learn something. I hope you guys learn something from this because I really do think this is useful.